All aboard! Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, football fans of all ages, I am Beast Mikey have now arrived in my train of thought. It's time to once again ask the question, where do we go from here? Now we're going to go to the AFC East, and we're going to go into a division that I know all too well. So my favorite team is in it, but fortunately, they're not bad leadoff. I say fortunately because that would mean they would have finished last in the division. The team that did finish last year were the Patriots. There's not a lot of good here, but there are two very redeeming qualities about this team. Drake May, very good rookie year considering the circumstances, considering there just wasn't that much around him on offense or on defense for that matter. It just didn't exist. Good. There's something to work with here. There's some actual physical talent, and I think you just have to get him some people around him, and you might have something here. This offensive line took a horrible beating for a lot of this year, and it was a bloodbath in some games where if you had any sort of competent pass rush, it was going to end badly for you. It was going to end badly for Drake May. Christian Gonzalez, very capable, very productive corner. Injury issues with both guys, yes, but Gonzalez is shown himself to be a very solid player. He's shown himself he could be a lockdown corner for years to come. Obviously still in his rookie deal, so he's got plenty of time to get better and get right. Kyle Duggar, good player. Christian Barmore, good player. They got some pieces here. And New England, as I'll get into when I get to the free agency part of it, they spent some bread too, so I'll get into that. But what I like some of the guys on their defense, and obviously getting Mike Vrabel as their head coach is going to be a very viable piece. It's a very good look for New England. But then there's the bad news. It's the fact that you notice the guys I named, I only named one on offense. This explains why the Patriots offense was really, really bad. Somehow only the Bears were worse in terms of offensive yardage per game. They were the worst in the league in terms of passing yards per game. I will say this about their rushing output. They were mid-team. They were close to the top 10, which I will say that's surprising considering how bad they were. Points-wise for New England, they didn't really score too many of them, and only two teams were worse. One I didn't cover yet, and one was the Cleveland Browns. So that's not great. So being 30th in points per game, no bueno. Defensively, like I mentioned, they had some talent, and they tried. They really did. They tried to keep it together for as long as they could, but any team with a capable offense could do damage against last year's Patriots team. And this is some evidence of this. They finished 11th worst in terms of yards allowed. They were actually respectable against the pass, which is pretty good. They were top 10 there. And I guess that's to be expected with Gonzalez and a couple other dudes I just mentioned, like Kyle Duggar. And then you get to the rushing defensive part, and it's towards the bottom. It's in the bottom 10. So you get the idea. They're actually literally 10th worst in the league in terms of rush defense. It wasn't the best defense in the league, and they showed some flashes, i.e. the Bengals game, for example. But when the dam broke, and teams were putting up 30 and 40 burgers on New England on a constant basis. It was not great. Something that is great, their amount of cap space and the ability for them to do damage. New England has the most cap space in the league at $93.2 million. They're a clean $9 million and change ahead of the second place team. They're not in this video. They'll be in the next one. So I'll explain that later. The Patriots have already made some moves to help replenish some of the lack of talent that was on this roster. From getting Milton Williams for $26 million per year. Obviously, the cap numbers will be different. They locked him up. Carlton Davis. It'll be a good, I think, that could be a solid move for them, the Carlton Davis one. Getting him to be the CB2 with Gonzalez. That actually, I think, fits Davis pretty well. That offensive line needs to be improved upon ASAP, though. I would like to see that. Harold Landry, can he replace what Matt Judon was? That will be necessary as well. He's going to be the one of the edge rushers on that team. And obviously, his time with Mike Vrabel in Tennessee, I think that's going to actually be a pretty decent signing. So New England made some good moves on defense to try to be, I would think, what Tennessee was with Vrabel, where they were physical and they beat you up. They just never had the quarterback. Can Drake May be that? But what kind of draft picks are they going to have? And this was another bad thing that happened to the Patriots. They had the golden opportunity to have the first overall pick in the draft. All they had to do was not beat the Bills, who were resting all their starters in Week 18. They beat the Bills, who rested all their starters in Week 18. So because of this terrible win, the Patriots ended up with the 4th pick as opposed to the first one. Why does that matter? They could have held that pick for ransom for a team that needed a quarterback. Even though this isn't a great QB draft, desperation will outweigh these situations in some cases. Anyway, New England's going to have the 4th pick. So what do you do with it? Do you go McMillan at receiver? Do you go with one of the elite tackles in the game and Banks or Campbell to try to help Drake May out in the worst way? Because you kind of got to do that. What do you do if you're New England? I think those are really the 3 picks you got to choose from if you are the Patriots here. New England does have their picks in all the other rounds except the 6th. They don't have a 6th at all. They do have also, because of the Judon trade, they have the 77th pick from the Falcons. They also have 3 7s. One's from the Titans, one's from the Chargers. So that's really where New England is right now. This is really part 1 of their rebuild. I think they still got a lot of ways to go and a lot of moves to make. How fast can they get back into contention in the AFC? Now, the Jets tried to take the Acela trade as we moved from the Boston area to the New York one with the Acela, if you will. And they tried to take the Acela train back to contention with Aaron Rodgers. This did not work out. This did not work out well. This did not work out at all. It was disastrous, in some cases hilarious, for how the Jets were playing this past year. There's talent, no question. Breece Hall and Braden Allen are 2 good backs. They are 2 capable backs who can bring a little bit of the thunder with Allen and lightning with Hall. They're very good. Garrett Wilson, very good receiver. But unfortunately for them, things just didn't work out when it came to the offensive line as they broke down. Like, Moses didn't have a great year in New York, and once he came over, and Tyron Smith was hit or miss. Olaf Fasano played pretty well, but then he got hurt. That was looking like a pretty good first-round pick for the Jets, so they took him over Brock Bowers. Although Brock Bowers played really well. Oh, that might not be great. But anyway, this was the Jets offense that when Aaron Rodgers was actually playing at his best, you did see some vintage Rodgers. That Texans game, for example, the Dolphins game at the end of the year, Rodgers played pretty well. It was actually both Dolphins game, really. He played pretty well in those games. But ultimately, the Jets defense also didn't do its part, and it's way too much chaos, way too much dysfunction, and it led to the end of the Joe Douglas / Robert Saleh tenures in New York. It was just a disaster pretty much from rip in a lot of different ways. Like New England's, the Jets offense was bottom 10, and they were the 9th worst offense in the league in terms of yardage. It was not great. The passing game, you would think with Aaron Rodgers, it would be all right. And actually, it was, I would say, about average. So no real issues there. Rushing with those 2 running backs, you would think it'd be great, but it was 31st, which is actually shocking. I haven't covered the worst rushing team in the league yet. But yeah, they were the 31st best team in the league, or the 2nd worst team in the league in terms of the rushing output per game, which was a little shocking to me. The points-wise, you would think it'd be low for the Jets, and it was. The Jets were bottom 10 in points. They were the 8th worst in terms of points scored per game. They did beat the Patriots once, which generally people are okay with that. They got beat the second time in a hilarious fashion. Remember the concussion issues I mentioned with Drake May? Well, that caused him the second Patriots-Jets game, and the Patriots lost. Patriots beat the Jets without May, so it's not great. Defensively, obviously there's talent. The Williams brothers and Garner and DJ Reed, though DJ Reed is gone, and there's some talent here on defense. Reed went to the Lions. And it showed, the defensive talent did. They finished 3rd in the league in defense in total yards allowed. So that's very impressive on their part. They also finished 4th in the league in terms of passing yards allowed. You would think with that secondary that would be the case, and it was. And then rushing yards, it wasn't as great as the other 2 things. And the Jets were actually just average. It wasn't awful. It was just average. So that's generally okay. I think you can get by with that as long as your offense can score, but the offense just could not score. So there you have it. In terms of points per game allowed, the Jets were actually below average, which is a little surprising. They were barely ahead of their neighbors in their own stadium and the Patriots, which is a little surprising, but that is what happened. So when it comes to the Jets and their salary cap, because obviously they have spent a lot of money doing a lot of things and trying to contend immediately as opposed to rebuilding as they go. The Jets are still in decent shape. They're hovering in the top 10. They're hovering around it. They're actually 12th officially in terms of salary cap space, $37.6 million in cap. They have been active in trying to fix some things. The Hassan Reddick deal never worked out, so that was moved to the side. They released Devontae Adams, so obviously there'll be a dead cap hit there. They will make a decision on Aaron Rodgers very soon enough, and then he'll make his choice where he wants to go. They've already signed Justin Fields to be QB1, so you already know what's happening there. They're going to have to eventually make a decision on Garrett Wilson, Sauce Gardner, and Breece Hall. They're going to have to make decisions there very quickly over the next few months and weeks. I do like Jermaine Johnson. Can Johnson get healthy? That will be necessary. But the Jets have been relatively active, and we'll see what they are able to do going forward when it comes to their free agency moves. Justin Fields obviously being the big one. He's probably going to be their quarterback next year. As for their picks, they will pick 7th. What do you do if you are the Jets? Do you go and get another receiver to be alongside Garrett Wilson? If the Patriots don't take McMillan, do you do that? Do you replace DJ Reed and go get a Will Johnson or pray that Travis Hunter falls to you? Do you go and with the interior in the offense and the defensive line, get a Mason Graham? Do you go get an edge rusher to try to help out Jermaine Johnson and Will McDonald? After the 7th overall pick, they will pick in every round with their picks except the 7th. They don't have a 7th at all. And they also have the Steelers 5th, and they have the Chiefs 6th from various trades. So these are where the Jets are. I do wonder what they will do now that Aaron Glenn is their coach. I would expect their defense to stay relatively good because they just have too much talent not to. I do think Glenn is a pretty solid coach, even though there were times in Detroit where they looked bad. Some of that I'd argue because of injuries. Is this a sign of the Jets improving and ending their drought in terms of making the playoffs? Or is this just another coach for the Jets to be in their coaching graveyard and things not working out? Now to the Dolphins, and now to my favorite team. It was the worst of seasons at times. It was the best of seasons at times. For Miami, it was chaos, I would say, from the rip, and even before the rip. Tyreek Hill getting arrested and then having that drama week 1. And only to have his best game of the year where the Dolphins had one really good half and beat Jacksonville coming back. And everything was okay, fine. We survived that. And now let's go on to week 2. Let's play the Bills. And it's the biggest game of our season. And it was an abject disaster. Nothing went right except for Devon Achane, as I may have mentioned in the previous video. And the Dolphins not only lose that game in humiliating fashion, Tua Tagovailoa probably plays the worst game of his career. Tua throws 3 innos, one of them was a pick 6, and then he gets concussed, and the season was off to the races from there in the worst possible way. Things were really bad for Miami without Tua. Say what you will about his physical traits or how he physically looks. He tried to be a leaner Tua, and that did not work out. He's trying to go back to a bulky Tua, a chubby Tua, which did work in 2023. But say what you will about Tua and how he looks or how his arm angles and throws and whatnot. Say what you will about all that. When he plays, Miami usually wins 2/3 of the time. And that is, it's been evident by his career record. Unfortunately, Tua's situation is that he does get hurt. And it was a concussion once again. And then at the end of the year, it was the hip, which we didn't really know until after the Niner game, which means he played the entire Niner game on a bad hip, and Miami won that game. There is some good news about this Dolphins team. Jonnu Smith played well, and Devon Achane played well, making Raheem Mostert expendable, unfortunately for him. The offensive line, when it was kind of sort of intact, actually played pretty solid. They ran the ball pretty well with Austin Jackson healthy and Teron Armstead healthy. Unfortunately, Jackson got hurt and things went kind of south. Aaron Brewer was a good signing. They did some good things. It just didn't work out to some degree. The defense came along towards the end of the year, and once Anthony Weaver was starting to implement his system, you could see it, that the defense was getting more aggressive, the defense was getting more productive and efficient with how they did business. Chop Robinson was looking like a very good rookie down the stretch, and Tyrell Dodson was looking like a very good signing in December, as Miami's linebacker issues were very prevalent for a decent amount of the year, but he was looking like a real good look with Jordan Brooks, which was another good signing. So this became more of a defensive team than an offensive team. It just didn't have the higher end talent on that unit, not named Jalen Ramsey and Calais Campbell and Zach Sealer, who all had very good years. So the Dolphins offense was, in 2023, the best offense in football. And it was number 1 in yards, number 2 in points. It was dominant in pretty much every facet for, I would say, 3/4 of the year. This past year, it was only mediocre. And I think a lot of that because of the lack of Tua, and a lot of that because of the offensive line and not being able to block at all for a run game, which was frustrating to watch at times. So it was only really average in terms of production. Slightly above it in terms of yardage, because when Tua played, he actually threw the ball pretty well in most of his games. Sans that Buffalo game I mentioned and the Houston game. And the run game was slightly below average, even though Devon Achane was looking like a very good back and looks like a potential star for the future. Surprisingly, the Dolphins, like I said, went from number 2 in points to bottom 12 in points. They finished 11th worst in terms of points scored per game. Still second best in the division, but that's to say something about this division and how bad it mostly was when Tua wasn't around. Defensively, however, is where things were really impressive for Miami. The Jets, I mentioned, finished 3rd in terms of yards allowed. Miami was 4th. And a lot of that was because of how the season ended for them. The Dolphins played really well down the stretch on defense. The passing defense was top 10. Some of that is Ramsey. They're actually 9th in terms of defensive passing. You can't really throw the ball that well in the AFC East, let it be known. You have 3 top 10 pass defenses in this division. And I didn't even get to the division winners yet. They were not in the top 10, though. Anyway, Dolphins finished 9th in terms of pass defense. Rushing defense, Dolphins 9th again. So in Miami, again, Calais Campbell played very well. Zach Sealer, maybe the most underrated player in the game, played very well. Jordan Brooks and Tyrell Dodson, like I said, played really well. So you can see what Weaver's system was doing. And this is with questionable safety play. And aside from Ramsey, in terms of cornerbacks, kind of sort of shaky cornerback play. But there is some hope there if Miami can retool properly. Which brings me to the cap situation that the Dolphins have. And it currently says that Miami is hovering at the bottom. Last I saw it was 30th. Looking through all these, now it's the worst in the league at a negative $13 million and change. Obviously, this is with some new contracts figured in. I do trust is a restructure or two coming and some money that'll be cleared up momentarily. Some was already done with the Teron Armstead restructure, the Bradley Chubb restructure. The real question is, will Tua be restructured? I don't think he should be. I let this year play out and see what happens. And will Tyreek Hill be restructured? Again, I probably let this year play out. If you can restructure Tyreek, cool, do it. But I'm not overly looking forward to making that kind of restructured deal if you're going to go that route. So I let this ride out. Try to make some smaller moves like Miami has made over the last couple days. Getting Nick Westbrook-Ikini, for example, keeping Dotson on a 2-year deal. They signed James Daniels from the Steelers to be the right guard. They need 2 guards. The Dolphins do. They made some solid moves to help fix some holes here. Melifonwu from Detroit, Aston Davis from the Jets. They could be your 2 starting safeties. Miami could still draft one. And Miami has been able to keep a lot of the guys together and I think upgraded some other pieces. Losing Javon Holland may hurt in terms of talent. Holland did not have a good year last year. There's no other way to say it. but we'll see what happens with the rest of this team. Draft pick wise, they will have a good amount of them. The Dolphins, for once, actually have plenty of picks. There's 10 of them here. And some of them are compensatories from Christian Wilkins and Robert Hunt, going to various places and getting paid and doing their thing. Really, Hunt did. The Dolphins have the 13th pick in the draft. That screams offensive lineman, that screams the other guard, or defensive tackle. Calais Campbell retires, and even if he doesn't, I'd still draft one somewhere. Maybe a box safety like Xavier Watts. I would love Tyrell Booker personally, or Will Campbell, or Calvin Banks. You play either of those two other guys and swap them at guard, or Booker, who's a natural one. And either the defensive tackles like Kenneth Grant or Walter Nolan from Ole Miss, that would work out as well. There are plenty of pieces here where Miami could go to work. Jahad Campbell at linebacker could also be a major chess piece for Anthony Weaver. There's some good spots here, and Miami will probably not be done in free agency either. They have their own picks in the first 5 rounds. They have a compensatory in the 4th. They have a compensatory in the 3rd. Actually, they don't have their own natural pick. That was traded away. They also have the Broncos' 5th round pick, the Bears' 7th round pick, and 2 more 7ths. They don't have a 6th. That's where the Dolphins' picks are this year. This feels like sink or swim, get it right or get out for Chris Greer, Mike McDaniel, and Tua. I think it's on the board that if things go bad or are close to similar to last year, where Miami was 8-9, even with a 6-3 finish, it's on the board that all 3 of them are gone. And I think Stephen Ross did the right thing by making sure of that with his presser. And the pressure is on all 3 of those guys. Can they get it done? So this AFC East was so bad without Tua for a good amount of it that Buffalo clinched it by Thanksgiving weekend. That's how dominant the Bills were. They were supposed to be rebuilding. They were supposed to be, okay, we lost a lot of defensive pieces, and though we do have a superhero in Josh Allen, we're going to kind of sort of rebuild, and it's possibly catchable for the Dolphins or Jets to beat them. That did not happen. Buffalo won all 4 of those games against those 4 teams, and were only really challenged in 2 of them. And it was a really dominant performance by Buffalo in the regular season. But as we know, this ain't about the regular season to Buffalo. Denver was a warm-up in the playoffs, and then you got the playoff game with Baltimore, where the Ravens kind of self-destructed and shot themselves in the foot. And then you get the AFC Championship, which is basically going back to their House of Doom in the postseason, Arrowhead, the Chiefs. They did all they could. They fought incredibly hard, Buffalo did. Josh Allen played well. James Cook was outstanding. But unfortunately, Kansas City was able to win, and Buffalo left too many things up to chance. And that's where Kansas City was able to take advantage of it, get the job done, and move on to the Super Bowl once again, beating Buffalo in the playoffs for the 4th time in 5 years. Devastating, agonizing, torturous. These are ways I would think a Bills fan would describe what this run has been, where they've been so close to the Super Bowl, and yet they can't get back there. They did have the MVP in Josh Allen, but a lot of us knew that was going to happen if Buffalo were going to be as good as they were. And he was, and they were. But still, just couldn't get through. Just couldn't break through. They were a top 10 offense, but we expected that out of Buffalo. They produce a lot of yards in a lot of different ways. They can throw the ball as well because Josh Allen's like that. Another top 10 performance there. They ran the ball well because not just Allen, but James Cook became a top 5 to 7-ish running back. Another top 10 performance there. And just Buffalo was as advertised in a lot of ways. 9th, and 9th were their totals everywhere. At least they're consistent. And they were really good in terms of scoring points. They were 2nd in the league in that. They did hang a 40 piece on the Rams with Josh Allen being in God mode and lost, which was wild. But they also hung a 50 piece on Detroit. So that's kind of wild. But all of it happened because Buffalo's offense was crazy. Well, 48 technically in Detroit. But you get the idea. They're really good at putting the points on the board and really putting stats up. Defensively, they were, in this division, I'd say the only unit that wasn't awesome in something. Buffalo wasn't. They're good, yes, but they weren't awesome at it. They were above average in terms of total yards per game, which barely puts them third in this division because the Dolphins and Jets played so well defensively. Now, passing yards, a little concerning that they were bottom 10. That's a little alarming, but that's secondary is something they're absolutely going to have to fix. Although I do like Taron Johnson. I think he's a good corner. And the rushing defense, hovering around the top 10, which is not bad. So Buffalo wasn't sparkling great at anything, but they were seemingly, I would say, a bend but don't break type of unit defensively, where they didn't allow teams to go absurdly nasty. They finished right behind Miami in terms of points allowed. They were 10th in points allowed. So that's kind of what the point I'm saying here. Buffalo was a bend but don't break type time and type team defensively. They just didn't get over the hump this time. Will they ever with Josh Allen? Let's get to the cap space situation. And though Buffalo is at the bottom of the league as well as the Dolphins are, they're at least under the cap. It'll probably be a little different once the Joey Bosa numbers come in. And once they're able to fix that, they obviously just restructured and seriously paid Josh Allen a major deal. James Cook is looking for a deal. But where Buffalo is right now, they are 7th from the bottom and 8th from the bottom, I should say, at $12.7 million in terms of cap space. And surprisingly, the Saints have more than 8 other teams, which is wild to think. But anyway, that's a Saints issue. Buffalo, I would imagine, will still be somewhat aggressive in trying to fix a hole or two, and maybe even do something about that secondary, because I think it could use some help, as I've just described. Speaking of the Bills and where they could get that help, draft pick-wise, they're a decent drafting team. They will be picking 30th in the draft. Obviously, making the AFC Championship game, that'll happen. They have the Vikings second in a roundabout way, getting it back from the Stephon Diggs trade to Houston, which is kind of wild to think about that. 6 degrees of separation flows. They have their own pick in the second as well. They don't have a third, but they do have 2 4s. One's from the Bears. They have 2 5s. They have a 6 from the Giants, a 6 from the Lions, and a 6 of their own. So that's where Buffalo will be picking. Where will Buffalo try to look now that they kept Greg Rousseau and they did the Allen deal and now they got Bosa? Where will Buffalo look to try to finish the job and get over the hump to the Super Bowl? Do they bring back Amari Cooper? Do they go and get a number 1 receiver, even still in the draft or free agency? These are things that we'll need the answers to. So that will wrap it up for the AFC East. A division that's got a team that's rebuilding, a team that doesn't want to rebuild, a team that's trying to break through, and a team that's trying to go all the way this time. There are a lot of things that need to be fixed up and finished, I think, with all 4 teams. But I do think Buffalo isn't too far away. And if Miami gets things right, they won't be either. Coming up next, we're going to have the only AFC division that had 3 teams make the playoffs. The Chiefs, who obviously made it to the Super Bowl. The Broncos, who were a shocking playoff entrant. The Chargers, who were slightly less shocking of a playoff entrant. And then there are the Raiders, who could have had the first overall pick and decided not to want the first overall pick. Many questions with all 4 of these teams, so we'll figure out where did they go from here. Las Vegas, you will be the first stop of my next train of thought.